How's it going, everyone? December 14th edition of Octagon Outlook. I am James Lynch. Got a great co-host for you guys here today. One of the best in the business, my good friend and yours, Cole Shelton from bjpen.com, joining us here on the program. Cole, how's it going?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing awesome. Thanks for stepping in and doing this. Last UFC card to talk about for the year, so really wanted to give you guys a good co-host here today. We've had some great co-hosts, but Cole, glad to have him on here for the first time. Before we get into recapping UFC 256, if you guys could hit a like, hit the like button on this video and hit the subscribe button. We want to hit 10,000 subscribers as soon as possible. We don't just have MMA on here. We got hockey, we got football, we got a lot of everything. So definitely make sure you guys do that, and be sure to leave us a comment as well after the video, what you think of the show. We're always loving your feedback, but let's get into it. Cole, this was one of the best cards of the year, if not the card of the year, UFC 256, which, heading in, I don't think got a lot of love, and it's one of those cards that really surprised us. But the main event is what everyone's talking about. The flyweights, they delivered. Deiveson, Figueiredo, Brandon Moreno. I can't remember the last time we had a draw, Cole, that people were happy about. I mean, everyone seemed to love this fight. I didn't see a lot of complaining. Let's start first with just the score itself. Did you think this was the right call with Deiveson, Figueiredo, and Moreno being a majority draw?
I actually had a draw. I think I gave Moreno 2 and 4, I believe, and then Figueiredo 1, 3, 5. And then obviously with the point deduction in the third, it's going to make it 47-47. I could have given Figueiredo, I think the second it was, or the fourth, one of those rounds. I didn't have a problem if it was Figueiredo winning. I saw some people saying Moreno should have won, which I didn't agree with. I thought he only won 2 rounds at most, but it was definitely a close fight. I'm not mad at the draw, though, especially with the point deduction.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a sec here, but it's funny. I saw the same thing. I did a reaction video on Saturday to the fight, and I got all these dislikes, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I looked at the comments, and everyone's like, Moreno won. What are you talking about, man? And I was like, look, I think a couple of things played into that. And first off, I want to point out that I sort of called this a little bit. I said Moreno was going to take this fight into deep waters. He's a tough guy to finish. That's exactly what happened. He definitely had his moments in the fight, but I felt the commentary was a little biased, Cole. I don't know if you noticed that. I actually went back and watched it the next day without the volume on. I did think it was a little bit more decisive for Deiveson. I actually had the same scorecards you did in terms of having it for Deiveson, having it as a draw, but then if you needed to give it to someone, you might have given it to Deiveson in the fight. But just a great performance. This was a gift for the UFC, right? Because they for years have been sort of disrespecting the flyweight division. They never really had a fight like this. I think we can agree, probably the best flyweight fight in history, and a fight that really captivated people's attentions. I mean, I even had people that don't watch the UFC message me and be like, hey, did you see that fight? And I was like, of course, this is my job. So it was really cool there. But I think the big thing coming out of this is what is next. I think you have to do a rematch here, Cole. I know some other people have suggested Cody Garbrandt. We don't need to mention any names, but to me, this is a gift for the UFC. Why not cash in on the rematch? Is that what you're thinking too?
Yeah, I think you give him a rematch. I think you give him as much time. Like, even if this fight doesn't happen till like June or July, like give him 6-7 months off. Both these guys just fought twice in 3 weeks. And this was not they took a lot of damage in this fight. Like, I have no problem with this fight headlines. Even if it could be on another pay-per-view main event, maybe they have it as a co-main, but I think sometime in the summertime, you probably not probably, I think you have to rebook this fight in the summer.
I agree. And here's the risk you do if you insert Cody Garbrandt in there. What if he wins? Then that ruins this rematch, ruins all this talk that we have of the fight. I think when you have a fight like this, like I said, which was a bit unexpected, I think, the average person thought Deiveson Figueiredo was going to go out there and steamroll Brandon Moreno like he had done the last 2 opponents. That did not happen. You have this new narrative now, and I think it's very interesting to see what they decide to do. But I think they'd be making a colossal mistake if they don't make this rematch happen. And like I said, give it some time. Give these guys full camps, proper weight cut, all that stuff, and let's see how they really shine on the big stage. So I think great performance from both flyweights, and just good for the division, Cole. I mean, we were talking about a year about this, a year ago, about how this division might not even exist anymore. And now here they are delivering one of the fights of the year. So really great stuff all around in the main event. All right, let's talk about the co-main event. This was another incredible fight, not for Tony Ferguson, but for Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira getting the decision win. This could have easily ended in the first round. I think Charles Oliveira either broke Tony Ferguson's arm or dislocated it or whatever. Not a doctor, obviously, but did you expect that dominant of a performance from Oliveira in this fight? Because, I think some people felt like Tony just had one bad fight. He was going to shine here. That certainly did not happen on Saturday night.
I was picking Tony Ferguson to win. I was fairly confident going because I have a hard time trusting Charles Oliveira. I've always thought that when he gets that big step up, he just kind of falters. Some people say he looks at the way he fights. Like, you look at the Holloway, you look at Paul Felder, like, he just doesn't live up when he gets that big name. People were saying, oh, well, Kevin Lee was that. I talk Kevin Lee a lot. I like Kevin Lee, but I don't know if he's really that top 10 lightweight. This fight really proved that Charles Oliveira is a top 3, if not one. Like, I think top 5, if not top 3 lightweight in the UFC.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think with Oliveira, I mean, I'll talk a little bit later of some of the implications of this win, but certainly puts himself in a good spot. But what do you do with Tony Ferguson? You know, I've seen a lot of chatter about what's next for him. Will the UFC cut him? I've heard all types of stuff after this performance. I think they'll probably keep Tony around just because of how popular he is. I think him, as opposed to say like Yoel Romero or someone else that the UFC has sort of cut ties with, I think they will keep Tony around for another fight. But I don't think he's just going to fight anyone, Cole. Like this idea of him fighting like, you know, an up and comer or something like that, I think is sort of gone at this point. I think they'll give him a fun fight. I think like a Paul Felder fight makes sense, or something along those lines where Tony can still have a decent name value fight going forward. Is that kind of where you're leaning, or do you think this is the end of Tony in the UFC?
Yeah, in my column of what's next, I literally put Ferguson, Paul Felder.
Oh, there you
Both
go.
guys are on 2 fight losing streaks. It makes a lot of. I saw a bunch of people saying like, "Oh, Ferguson, Islam Makhachev, he didn't get the Habib fight. Let's let him fight Habib's protege." If I'm Tony Ferguson, why would you take that fight? Like, the chances of Tony Ferguson getting back to a title shot, I think, are slim now. 2 fight lose streak. He's just getting up there in age. I think it's time. Like, just give him fun fights. Like, got Paul Felder, just a guy with a name. Like, he can headline a fight night card, and it's going to be entertaining, even though it doesn't have a lot of implications on the division.
And can we also just stop this narrative? I know people are like, this is the final coffin of, you know, final nail in the coffin of Tony and Habib. I don't think Tony and Habib was going to happen anyways. Why would Habib come out of retirement and fight Tony Ferguson? Like, that's not an incentive for him to come out of retirement, especially with Ferguson losing to Gaethje. That ship sailed when he lost to Justin Gaethje. I just want to be clear about that, because I see a lot of people being like, oh, now it'll never happen. No, it wasn't going to happen after he lost to Gaethje. Trust me. When you lose decisively, there was no reason for Ferguson to, even if he had won this fight, I don't think he would come back, and I don't think Habib would come out of retirement and fight him. So I just wanted to mention that as well as a little side note on this fight. And yeah, really great co-main event. And then also on the main card, Mackenzie Dern gets a decision win over Vrima Jandiroba. I don't know how they say it on the broadcast. I probably butchered it there, but nonetheless, the two jiu-jitsu fighters decided to stand and trade, and it is Mackenzie Dern getting the win. I wasn't surprised that it went this way. This kind of reminded me, actually, credit to Patrick Auclair from Body Lock, who kind of said this was like the female version of Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington, where you have two wrestlers who decided to stand and trade. In this case, it was two jiu-jitsu practitioners deciding to stand and trade, and it is Dern getting the decision. What did you think of Dern? Because I thought full camp with Jason Perillo, her striking looked great. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. Jason Perillo's an underrated coach. He does not get enough respect for the guys he works with striking wise, but Mackenzie Dern striking, I think that was a big knock on her, was what happens if she can't get down the fight to the ground. Obviously, Verna's not the best striker, but she did show a lot of improvements from her last fight, or Johnny was just from her last fight, previous fights. Like, her striking, if her striking even is just, it stays at that, it's good enough where she can stand with some people and then just try to get down to the ground, where we saw earlier on the card, like a Chase Hooper has no striking and has to get down to the ground. At least Mackenzie Dern's striking is improving, where if it stays standing, she's not totally out of a fight.
Yeah, and I think people forget how good Dern is. Just the one loss to Amanda Ribas, which was a fight that she took, you know, just months after giving birth. She's 5-1 in the UFC, Cole. This was a big win for not only Mackenzie Dern, but for the UFC. She's still someone very marketable, despite all the idiot fans are still obsessing over her accent. Like, I'm so tired of that. Why don't we talk about how good of a fighter she is? You know, John Coe, our buddy at Kumite TV, suggested Claudia Gadelha. I think that's fine, because you know what? Claudia's regressed a lot. Mackenzie Dern seems to be on the come up. That would be a very interesting fight, especially if the fight stood standing, just with Claudia's striking and everything she brings to the table. So that's the type of matchup I'd like to see next for Mackenzie. In terms, I think rankings wise, it might not work, but Mackenzie's got to get a ranked opponent after this. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think two names I thought of was obviously Claudia or Michelle Watterson, because I think
Right.
Watterson's
Waterson's
up
out of her
there.
fight. Yeah.
Yeah, just because then obviously timing wise might work, because Mackenzie Dern just fought. Michelle is out of her fight. Who knows how long she's going to be? But I think Mackenzie Dern needs a top 10 girl just to really see. And Michelle Watterson would really test her if she can't get down to the ground. Obviously, Miss Watterson's known for striking. And then with Gadelha has such good wrestling. Whatever, she keeps it standing. Like, both are intriguing matches and would really test what Dern is really made out of.
And Cole, Mackenzie's 27. Like, we're not even in the prime of her career yet. So that's what's so cool too. And I think, like I said, her linking up with Perillo at the perfect time, which is something she was going to have to address anyways, was her stand-up, right? You can't just rely on your jiu-jitsu all the time. So it's going to be very interesting to see what she can do, because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to think in that division, like, who's really like a good ground specialist outside of Mackenzie? I mean, I can't really think of anyone that sort of specializes in that in the top 15. So like I said, she's going to pose a lot of interesting matchups going forward, especially with her stand-up sort of improved since the last time we saw it. Let's keep it moving. The middleweights. How about this knockout? Kevin Holland finishing Jacare Souza. I see on Tapology they call it a punches during scramble. I mean, literally, Holland just got up and knocked him out. It was crazy. Yeah. Like, you don't see that too often. But talk about playing your cards right here. Kevin Holland cashing in big. 5 wins in 2020. What did you think of that performance?
Man, I was picking Jacare to win this fight. I have still questions about Holland's ground game just because Brendan Allen submitted him. I kind of was like, that's the last true grappler he fought. I thought Souza's a lot better than Brendan Allen, but he went out there and his scrambles were impressive. Like Jacare couldn't keep him down, and then that move just came out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden it was like 3 punches and Jacare's knocked out. And the thing is, Jacare doesn't get knocked out like that. Like when he loses, like Jan Blachowicz over 5 rounds couldn't knock out Jacare. Like they went to a split. Like I think this is the statement win Kevin Holland needed because a lot of the talk this year is, oh, he's gone 5-0, but look who he fought. But you can't really knock his record after he beats Jacare Souza.
I agree. Is that the last time we see Jacare Souza in the UFC?
I think it could be. I think he could be one of those 60 cuts. I think him and JDS probably are just because they're making a lot of money. They're on a big losing streak. And at 41 years old, or he might be 40 now, but he's in those 40s. But like, is the UFC really care to pay him that much to a guy that's probably just going to be used as a gatekeeper right now? I'm not too sure if the UFC really wants to keep him around.
And what do you do with Holland? It's interesting to see sort of where he fits. I've saw some people mention Edmund Shabazian, but I just think they're not going to give Shabazian a tough opponent next time out. They're going to give him a layup. They built him up this high. Why are they going to give him a tough fight and sort of ruin his career? Shabazian's still a young guy. There's a bunch of fights already booked up. You've got Heinisch and Gaslam. You've got, what's the other one? Weidman and Hall. There's a bunch of things happening at middleweight right now. But if you're, the matchmakers, where are you leaning with Kevin Holland?
I might be in the minority, but I don't think he gets a ranked guy. I think he fights another guy in the cusp of the rankings. That's Sean Strickland, who's coming off a knockout over Brendan Allen. Both the guys talk a lot of trash in the Octagon. It would be a fun fight. And both those guys are at the cusp of that top 15 where whoever wins that fight gets a top 10 guy next.
You know what? I'd agree with you only in the sense that I know Colin wants to keep active, and there's a lot of pieces, like I mentioned, that are already sort of booked up in that division. So I think it is entirely possible that Holland could take another unranked fight. But I think at this point, 5 wins this year. I mean, that's crazy. This is like Donald Cerrone back in 2016 when he's like just fighting every couple months. So all the power to Kevin Holland. This guy's stock can be higher. Someone mentioned this on my chat this morning, but I hope we do get to see Israel Adesanya and Kevin Holland at some point. Just the lead up to that, just how both are pretty dynamic. I think that would be such a fun fight. Obviously not next. Holland doesn't deserve it. I'm not, arguing that, but I think that's got to happen at some point just with how well both guys have really marketed themselves in the middleweight division. We got to talk about the Cyril Gane fight in the heavyweight division. Of course, Cyril Gane getting the TKO elbow knockout over Junior Dos Santos. I thought, as much experience as JDS had heading into the fight, I think you're fighting a guy in Gane who's just got something. He's got another gear in this heavyweight division. He's got something that you don't see from a lot of heavyweights in that he's very fast. He's got good stand-up, and Gane looked great. I don't think there was any controversy in this stoppage. I thought it was completely fair. What did you think of this performance from Cyril Gane?
Yeah, when the fight was booked, I think everyone kind of knew what the UFC wanted. I think at this point in his career, unfortunately, is JDS's chin is kind of gone. Like he's on a 4-fight losing streak, all 4 by knockout. But the problem is everyone's gonna remember JDS that. But if you look down his resume, like he has one of the best heavyweight records.
Oh, yeah.
The guys he's beat, like Stipe, Cain Velasquez, Fabricio Verdum, like he's beat the who's who. But just lately, he just right when he gets hit once, like that was the same with Rosenstruck. Like he was winning against Rosenstruck, then he gets hit once and goes down. Like at this point, I wonder if the UFC is going to keep him. I wonder if he's going to think about retiring. Like 4 losses in a row, you're probably not getting back to a title shot. So does he really care to fight more guys like Gane coming up? I'm not too sure.
We'll talk about what's next for JDS in a second here, but yeah, Gane. I mean, like his last name suggests, I think he's made a lot of gains. We got to put him in there with another big opponent. I think Rosenstruck, someone like that next, just continuing to build him up. Again, Patrick Auclair, who I'll mention here, mentioned that he doesn't think he's a top 5 guy yet. That's probably true, but I think at the same time he's defeating all of his opponents impressively. So we're kind of at that point where it's like, look, we got to give him a test here. So I think a Rosenstruck is good, or someone in that sort of high range of the heavyweights, because sooner or later we're going to be talking about him for a title shot. And I think part of, people have been paying attention. That narrative of him potentially fighting Ngannou at some point would be very interesting, because if you guys know, Ngannou had a falling out with Fernand Lopez, who was the coach of Cyril Gane. So imagine if that fight ever came to fruition, kind of like an old wrestling storyline there. I'd love to see that at some point. But yeah, big win for Cyril Gane, JDS. I'll talk about what's next for him after this. But I picked a few underdogs on this card, Cole, and one of them actually came to fruition. Cub Swanson. How about this guy getting the knockout over Daniel Pineda? This was an absolutely dominant fight for Cub Swanson. And you talk to anyone that trains around Daniel Pineda, they're like, this guy's so underrated. He's so good. He's got all these fights. And I don't disagree with that. Pineda's debut, or his return fight, I should say, to the UFC, that win over Herbert Burns, very impressive. But Cub Swanson was in this fight from the opening bell, and I'm sure fighting for a lot with his kids and everything. But I was just so impressed with this. And I don't think Pineda was in this fight at all. What did you think?
Yeah, and it's something I probably should have saw coming, because even when I talked to Pineda before the fight, like he kind of laid out perfectly. He's like, if I don't get him down to the ground, I'm getting knocked out. Like he was very open. He's like, I'm getting knocked out or I'm gonna go submit him. Like that's the only two ways this fight plays out. And that's how it played out. He couldn't get Swanson to the ground. He ends up just getting knocked out. Like I'm surprised he didn't shoot for more takedowns. It seemed early on like Pineda was interested in just standing and banging with him. And then Cub Swanson all of a sudden, 2-fight winning streak. Like he's always a big name guy, but this was a real statement win to knock out Daniel Pineda, because Pineda before this was on a massive run. Like although he had the steroid issues in PFL, he still beat Jeremy Kennedy. Like he was a guy that was supposed to fight Lance Palmer in the finals. He beat Herbert Burns, stole all his hype. Like this is a really good win for Cub Swanson.
And I don't know what you do next with him. Again, he's 37, but I mean, that was such a dominant win. I feel like you need to see what's left for him in his career at this point. And, kudos to that team. I don't think they have a team name, but it's like him, Juan Archuleta, Brian Ortega, like they've been on a roll lately. So whatever they're doing over there is obviously working. As far as next opponents, I mean, Swanson isn't ranked right now, but I'd love, like, why not Ryan Hall? I think that would be a fun fight or something like that, like against a ranked opponent. A lot of people, by the way, mentioning Bryce Mitchell. If you guys watch our interview here with Bryce we did a few weeks ago, Bryce is not ready to come back, I don't think, until like the spring or maybe the summer next year. He had a pretty bad hand injury. So let's knock him off the board. But I think Hall, Edson Barbosa, any of those types of fights would be very interesting for Cub Swanson. What do you think is next for him?
Yeah, I think it really depends if he wants. He could make a run up the rankings, or he could get in these like legendary fights. I know before this fight, he has mentioned guys like he wants, before his career is over, guys like Aldo, Faber, Pettis. If Swanson tells the UFC he's like, I only have a couple fights left, like maybe it are those guys. But I do think you give him one more shot, like see what he's made of, see if this return is something special, give him a rank guy. I think Ryan Hall's perfect. If Swanson keeps it on the feet, he should win. But if it goes down to the ground, like Swanson has underrated jiu-jitsu, or let's see how that matches up against Ryan Hall. And if Hall wins, like that's his big statement win. Like his big win probably is what, BJ Penn right now.
Right.
And Cub Swanson does a lot more than what beating BJ Penn, who was on a 6-fight losing streak.
And hasn't the big thing with Hall been that he wants fun fights, notable fights? I mean, this is Cub Swanson to a T. I mean, this should make sense. So we'll see if it does end up happening. I've tried to, by the way, get an interview with Hall. I don't know if you've had much luck, but it's just been tough. Like I have his number. I know his manager well, but he's a tough guy to do interviews. I know our buddy John Coe did one recently, but hopefully get some insight from Hall as to what his next move is. Because I don't know. I do a live chat every week, Cole. Every week I get asked about Ryan Hall. What's next? What's next? It's like, I want to know too. Like we just want to see him fight more. So there you go. Big win there for Cub Swanson. Continuing on the prelims, Rafael Fiziev. I've been forever calling this guy Fiziev. I don't know why, but it's Fiziev. He got the quick win over Renato Moicano. I know you and I are both kind of high on Moicano. This was all Fiziev's fight. He looked outstanding. His striking was good. Those body shots were incredible. He's ready for a step up. And Moicano, I mean, this is his first, I think, finish that he's been finished at 155. So really big win there. Was it a little early? Yeah, but you know what? He tried to get up after, and he was definitely not in sorts. So probably a good call by the referee here. But what do you think of Fiziev? He's kind of looking like a dark horse at 155.
Yeah, when this fight was booked, I didn't really understand it. I thought Moicano should have got a rank guy. He was a top 5 guy. Like at featherweight, he was a 1 win away from beating Jose Aldo, from getting a title shot. He was a backup for that Holloway Ortega fight. Like, and then when he got thrown to 155, he got like Demir Has, but just made no sense. Made quick work. I thought he was going to be a rank guy. And then against Fiziev, I just had so many question marks. I'm like, what happens when this guy goes down the ground? And he's a guy that everyone has so much hype around, but he was knocked out just a few fights before. He didn't really have a good win. Like the broadcast is saying how Mark Diakese is such a good win. Mark Diakese, I don't even know if he has a winning record in the UFC. Like
I don't think he's in the UFC anymore. Is he? Did he get cut? I wasn't sure. Yeah.
I have no, like, he might be one of those guys getting cut, but Moicano's like a good win. Like I know he doesn't have a huge name, but this is a top 10 guy at featherweight. He's legit. And to knock him out like that, I still think it was early, but this was a good win. I think the sky's the limit for him, because his striking, like he's a head coach at Tiger Muay Thai. He coaches like Peter Yan, Volkanovski were shouting him out. Like his striking is legit. And if he can keep any fight standing, he's in any fight in lightweight.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of context here, like I can't remember if you went to that card, but did you go to the Holloway Ortega card when it was in Toronto? Oh yeah, because I think we had talked or something at that point. But the Moicano was the backup for that title fight. Do you remember that? He's supposed to weigh in. Like it's crazy to think the fall from grace he's had. Like since that win he had over Cub Swanson, and he had the win over Cater before that. Moicano's he's lost 3 of his last 4 fights. Like talk about a fall from grace. I don't know what he's got to do now, but like maybe it's just a bad opponent here. But it's just unfortunate the fall that Moicano's had, because he has he has a win over Cater, which is a really tough guy to beat. So yeah, we'll see what's next. But Fiziev, I mean, there's lots of good fights for him at lightweight. We'd be here all day naming them, but I don't think you can go wrong with whatever next matchups for him. How about the Canadian Gavin Tucker getting the win over Billy Quarantillo? Another fight I was surprised by. I thought Tucker looked outstanding in this one, just really working the body and getting the takedowns as well. Quarantillo didn't really have much in this fight. It was all Gavin Tucker. Your thoughts on the Canadian going to 13-1 overall now?
I should have picked my Canadian, but I thought Billy Q was the real deal.
I
I
think we
picked
all
him to
did.
win.
Yeah.
I thought he was actually, what surprised me was Gavin Tucker outpaced Billy Q. Like Billy Q is the guy that was slowing down, which everyone says, oh, his cardio is so good. And the whole knock was get Gavin Tucker late and he kind of slows down, but he dominated this fight from start to finish. Billy Q didn't really have any moments. But the thing that bugs me is I don't really get his call out. He's like, what? I think he's like 34, 35. So like he's getting up there in age, Gavin Tucker. And he calls out Alex Caceres, which I don't really get. Like I think at this age, at featherweight especially, you have to make your run now. Like this was a statement win. I don't get why he didn't try calling out someone at the bottom of that featherweight division, like the rankings. Like, to me, a Caceres fight might even be like I think you'd be lower ranked than what Billy Q is.
Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't like the call out either. They got to start giving him like notable guys in the division, especially the winning streak he's been on. Like Gavin Tucker looks like a different fighter than when he fought Rick Glenn a couple of years ago, and he's been much more improved. So I think something ranked maybe. We'll see what's sort of next for him. And for Billy Q, just a bump in the road, but he's still got some good wins in that weight class. So I think he'll be definitely getting matched up pretty well after this. All right, let's move along to the women's strawweight division. It is Tecia Torres getting her first TKO win, which unbelievably 17 fights, first TKO victory. So a little bit surprising. I thought she'd win a decision. That's usually Ticia's sort of MO, but Sam Hughes unable to come out after an eye injury. So her eye wasn't shut, but it was my understanding she couldn't see. There was sort of a weird thing that happened in the corner where Sam Hughes is like, I can't see. And her coach was like, okay, you're not fighting. She's like, wait, what? Like it was kind of one of those like weird things that happened, but credit to Torres, now 12-5 overall. Sam Hughes loses her UFC debut. What did you think of this fight?
Yeah, it was definitely. I thought Torres would win. I thought Torres would basically do what she did in the first round, just over 3 rounds. But
Yeah.
the thing with the corner was so weird is Sam Hughes gets back to her corner. She like whispers to her coach, I can't see. And then the coach is like, well, do you want to stop it? And she's like, well, I don't know. And then the coach's like, well, you can't see, like, let's stop it. And then she kind of hesitated. Like, even the commentator, like Dana Cormier picked up. He's like, if you want to stay in a fight, you don't mention anything that you can't see out of your eye. So even Cormier was wondering, like, maybe she wanted out of there, but it's still an impressive win for Tecia Torres. I still wish that Angela Hill fight happened. I think that's what they might do next, just because it has some it has some storyline just with the rematch. But this is obviously a good win for Tecia Torres. Is sneakily on a now a 2-fight winning streak.
No, I agree. And I agree with you on the Hill rematch. I think you got to do that. I mean, Torres still has a lot left in that division. It's kind of a shame they don't have an atomweight division because I think Torres would, I mean, she's like tailor-made for that weight class. So we'll see what they decide to do there. And then for Sam Hughes, yeah, just not a great fight. I mean, Torres dominated this fight. Sam Hughes was not in this fight whatsoever. I know they'll give her another fight after this, but yeah, I don't know. Like, and then, she lost like 2 fights ago against Vanessa Demopoulos in a fight that she was winning, but she ended up losing later in the fight. Demopoulos ended up submitting her. And then it was Demopoulos who got on Contender Series, right? Had Sam Hughes won that fight, she would have been on Contender Series. So either way, yeah, we'll see what they decide to do next. Maybe do a Battle of Washington next. Do Sam Hughes and Miranda Granger next. We'll see what they decide to do. But for Torres, I'm with the Hill rematch. Let's do that. And then we do have one more fight on the card: Chase Hooper, Peter Barrett. Okay, I was right about one thing, Cole. Chase Hooper did not look like a 3-1, almost 4-1 favorite on this card. He was losing this fight. His leg was jacked up. Peter Barrett was playing a perfect game plan for the first 2 rounds. And then in that 3rd round, he makes a mistake. He ends up getting caught, and Chase Hooper gets a submission win. This, in my opinion, is the equivalent of a Hail Mary in the NFL, as far as I'm concerned. Hooper, yeah, great that he got the submission win. Great that he worked with Ryan Hall, and he's developed that. But his stand-up still needs a lot of work, especially against a guy like Peter Barrett. But what did you think of this fight? Because, like I said, Peter Barrett was like a round away from being cashing as like a plus 300 underdog.
Well, I was picking Peter Barrett to win this fight, and people were calling me crazy. He's like, oh, Hooper's going to go out there and submit him in like a minute. People are saying like, oh, look, Barrett's been submitted by all these guys. But I don't think Hooper is that good. Like, I'll continuously to pick against Chase Hooper. Like, he has one path to victory is an Imanari roll if he can't, because his wrestling is not good, which that's the problem with all these jiu-jitsu guys. Like, we saw Damian Maia early on in his career. His whole game plan is get down to the ground, but he simply can't get it down to the ground because his wrestling's not good. And Chase Hooper's 21. Like, his strength isn't there yet. Like, Peter Barrett was so much older, where a lot of these guys at featherweight will just going to have more strength because they're a lot older, and will be able to just kind of throw them off when they go for takedown. So, and then on the feet, his striking defense, like, when I was talking to Peter Barrett, like I was asking about Hooper's striking defense. He goes, "Oh, his striking defense is block punches with his face," which is kind of true. Like he just kind of leans his head into a lot of these punches, but it was a good win for Hooper, like to go down 2-0 and then to get that late. Obviously a good win, but the problem is like I don't really know who you match him up with, just because Barrett, I think, was probably at that bottom of the featherweight division. And I know Joe Rogan was talking about it on the broadcast, was at 21, like he really shouldn't be in the UFC. Like he should be learning all these fights outside the UFC. And once you get thrown in the UFC, it's all tough fights. Like I don't know what they're gonna do. Like maybe they start bringing in guys just for Chase Hooper, but he needs to work on his wrestling and striking, or he's not gonna have much success.
Well, it was just such a weird circumstance, right? Because he won on Contender Series, and then he had the 2 fights on his developmental deal. So you're kind of like, okay, well, when's he going to get signed? And then they sign him, and I think they're like in that Caceres fight, anyways. It's like, oh, I think we might have rushed him a little bit too soon because he's only 21. Cole, like you're the same age as Chase Hooper. Like that's crazy how young like he is, so to speak, in terms of having to like catch up and learn things. And we've seen young fighters come in the UFC and falter. Dan Lozon's a good example. Joe Lozon's brother. Anyone remember him? Because he came in the UFC super young and lost a bunch of fights, and his career was just derailed because of that. And luckily Hooper got the win here. But yeah, I think Hooper looked more like a little bit of a slight favorite in that fight against Barrett. It shouldn't have been such a wide margin. And I want to remind people out there, this is another example of why just because a fighter's popular should not make him a big favorite in a fight. We had it years ago with Paige Van Zandt when she fought Rose Namajunas. This is the same thing here with Chase Hooper. And I like Chase Hooper. He's a Pacific Northwest guy like myself, like great interview, great guy, but we got to be realistic about where he's at in his career. And I'm with you. I think there's very few fights you can give him at featherweight right now where I'd be confident in him winning. I think a fight you could do, just because he didn't look great in his last fight, is Sean Woodson. Maybe there's a bit of a height discrepancy there, height and reach, but I think just another prospect is kind of what you got to go with Chase Hooper here, because I think if he fights anyone in the top 15 or anyone like that at featherweight, I think he loses. And for Slippery Pete, unfortunately, I think this is the end of the road for him. That's 2 losses now. This was really unfortunate. I would like to see another fight just because, again, I thought he was close to winning, but at his age and what he's done, don't be surprised if he's part of the 60 cuts. What do you think is next for either guy?
Well, yeah, and just quickly, what's kind of funny is I think the broadcast was getting the Tamer brothers mixed up because they were saying how impressive Hooper's win over was Tamer, when I think he was like 1-4 in the UFC.
Well, he got the wrong Tamer.
Up.
Someone pointed that out to me. Damon Martin was like, I think he meant Daniel or David. David Tamer's the good Tamer, not Daniel Tamer.
Yeah. Which, because I think they got that confused because they're like, oh, he has so many good wins in the UFC. And I'm like, he only had 1 win, but I think it is the end of the road for Peter Barrett. I like Peter Barrett. He's a great interview, always gives good stuff, but I don't know, maybe they give him 1 more just because he's close, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's cut. But again, Hooper, like I don't really know who you give him. Like they have to be so careful with his matching because he could be a star. Like he has a good following. Like he does that thing with Ben Askren. Like, so I think the UFC has to be careful, but I don't really know, like, you sign people to bring in so Hooper can beat them. Like I don't really know who he beats at featherweight now.
Yeah, no, it's going to be very interesting to see what they decide to do with him.
I have a suggestion for what's next. Nothing.
Let's hear it. Producer Jordan,
give me a year off. Like seriously, like this dude doesn't need to fight. I don't think he's clearly being paid for the things that he's doing on the side. He can make some content, make some money that way. I think this dude needs to be really dedicating every waking moment to his body and just becoming more physically mature. And I think the technique will come with that. But like, I don't know if he's at the spot where he could develop the type of striking technique that he would need with his lack of physicality at this point. I don't know. That's just me. I'm sitting there just like, have something, just eat more, do more. Like he's a kid, man. And it sucks because he's put in a situation where he needs to succeed.
I agree. Great suggestion, Producer Jordan. I'll tell you what you do. You send him to Thailand with Fiziev and you get his striking up to par there. You'll definitely learn some striking from him if you go in and go down there. I know there's some travel issues right now with COVID, but yeah, camp like that, you'll turn into a man pretty quickly in terms of the striking. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Give him the year off. Go live in Thailand in the dorms there. Enjoy some nice food and do that. I think that's a good suggestion there. All right, we talked about Charles Oliveira, Cole, and I'm going to go on a little rant here. This was a big win, and look, I know a lot of people sort of the talk of it was the decline of Tony Ferguson, but how about how good Charles Oliveira is? That's 2 dominant wins in 2020, one over Kevin Lee, where he beat Kevin Lee at his own game in striking, and then this fight, I should say, where he fights Tony Ferguson and beats him at his own game in the submission realm. I mean, he nearly finished Ferguson a few times in this fight, but I think we got to start talking about Charles Oliveira as a title contender. Now, look, I know we have Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor rematching approaching next month. I know Khabib's supposed to meet with Dana White. I know there's still Justin Gaethje. I know there's Michael Chandler. But I think Charles Oliveira, what he's done should get him a title shot next. Now, what does that look like? It's going to depend, like I said, what happens with Khabib. If Khabib stays retired and they make that McGregor-Poirier fight as an interim fight, I think Oliveira should get the winner, because I really think this guy has beaten guys decisively in his last couple fights. What more does he need to do to show that he's a title contender in this spot? And even if you give him someone as sort of like a fight in between, like a Dan Hooker or someone like that, I don't think it. I think the result's still the same. I think this guy is ready for a title shot now with how well-rounded he is. So if you're the UFC, and look, I know he's not super marketable, doesn't speak a lot of English, maybe not the most exciting guy in terms of interviews, but I think he's earned his title shot at this point with what he did against Tony Ferguson on Saturday night. If it was good enough for Gaethje, why is it not good enough for Charles Oliveira? Cole, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he definitely could be in the title conversation. I do think if Khabib vacates, I'm not going to be surprised McGregor Poirier is for the belt. And then say they do Gaethje Chandler, they just square off the winners. But I think Oliveira kind of deserves it. This is a big win over Ferguson, because the whole talk was Ferguson just beats Oliveira, he's right back for a title picture. So if Oliveira beats him and dominates him, like, you could have made a case he 10-8 round. He had 2 10-8 rounds. Like the first round, I don't get how Tony Ferguson didn't tap, but he dominated Tony Ferguson. No one dominates Tony Ferguson like that on the ground. Everyone talks about how good Tony Ferguson's ground game is. Well, Oliveira completely nullified it. He could be for a title fight, but the only problem is, say McGregor beats Poirier. Do you think the UFC really wants to do McGregor Oliveira when Oliveira has no English?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough sell, but I think at this point, you're right, not good for business. But what are you going to do? You can't keep ignoring this beast in the room, and that is Charles Oliveira. Like, I think, yes, deserved does not exist in MMA. We know that time and time again in terms of some of the matchmaking. But I think Oliveira has done enough in terms of the merit-based, sort of looking at the rankings, that he deserves some sort of big opportunity after this, whether it's McGregor or not. But I think he beats most guys in the top 5 in the weight class in general. I think Oliveira is that good. So just wanted to point that out, giving some love here to Charles Oliveira from his performance on Saturday night. The other fight I wanted to talk about is we touched on is Cyril Gane and Junior Dos Santos. And you mentioned it, Cole. This is probably the end of the road for JDS. And I think it will be. I mean, he's lost 4 in a row, 4 knockouts as well. It's not like he's losing, fights in a close decision. He's getting finished in these fights, and he comes with a hefty price tag. So you would think if a Yoel Romero can get cut at his age and the way he was performing, I think a JDS is pretty much done in the UFC. But I'll add something else. I think this has got to be the end of the road for JDS. I don't want to see him go to Bellator or Ryzen or any of these other promotions. And yes, there's probably a good chance he could fight someone in Ryzen or whoever and probably pick up a win here. But why risk that? This guy has been an absolute warrior in the Octagon. You were talking about, he's fought the who's who. If you look at this resume, one of the best heavyweights of all time, the former heavyweight champion. I'd like to see JDS hang it up. And I understand I'm just a guy behind a camera here making a suggestion, but I really don't see where Junior Dos Santos goes for here at 36 years old. I think he's done more than enough. And I think it's time for him to hang him up. Get another job, whether it's, an ambassador or coaching or whatever. I know it's, again, easy for me to say here, but I don't want to see him take any more damage, because Cole, you know where we're going with Junior Dos Santos right now? We're kind of getting in that BJ Penn territory. I hate to say it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I like Junior Dos Santos. I've talked to him a couple of times. He's been nothing but nice to me, but I think this is kind of it. Like, I thought Enter the Rosenstruck fight, I kind of thought that one was a do or die. Like, if he loses to Rosenstruck, like, what's he really going to do? And then after they give him Cyril Gane, who's, I think, was ranked, 14, or might not even been ranked. Like, yeah, okay, so you lost to the 14th ranked guy. Like, are you really going to stick around to fight unranked heavyweights at this point in your career? Like, and I don't even, Dana White at the press conference was hoping that JDS is going to retire. So I kind of feel like it's going to be like an Anderson Silva thing where they're going to say, all right, you retire. Unfortunately, we're going to have to cut you. But either way, I think this is the end of the road from the UFC, and I hope it's the end of his fighting career.
We also had a bit of news over the weekend. Dana White sort of alluding to it, or they mentioned it on the broadcast as well, that there will be one more fight added to UFC 257, which takes place next month. That's, of course, the Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier card. A lot of speculation as to what that could be. I think if you throw the B word out there, the big word, if you're implying there's going to be a big fight, it's got to be someone notable. I know they did. I was sort of joking offline with you, Cole, that is it really Khalil Roundtree and his opponent that he's fighting? Obviously not. That's going to be the case, but I think it's going to be a big name. And I think all signs are pointing to Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje, with Chandler already saying he's in camp. Gaethje, I'm sure, wanting to get back in there after losing fairly quickly to Khabib Nurmagomedov. What do you think the fight is? Let's start there first.
I think it's Gaethje Chandler, because even in Dana White's interview with Dan Bronster, he's like, if we're going to Fight Island, like, we have to have a backup for that fight, just in case Poirier falls off. You can't have McGregor do all this work to then not fight anyone, because the problem is, with Fight Island, you can't just bring in like a Nate Diaz on 4 days notice, because they got to fly there. They got to do all the quarantine. So you have to have another lightweight fight. It has to be a big name. Gaethje Chandler's perfect. Let's see Michael Chandler's debut. I assume Gaethje would be the backup, so if Poirier McGregor falls out, Gaethje just slides in there. But I think that has to be the fight because you need another big lightweight fight on that card.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to end up being. I mean, Chandler, I think, will be involved regardless whether Gaethje's the opponent or not. We'll have to see. Maybe Dan Hooker gets that spot. I don't know, but it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. I get this sense that they value Michael Chandler very highly because why would he be the backup for the title fight last month or 2 months ago between Khabib and Gaethje? I mean, I think that they want to cash in on this guy. They want to use the whole Bellator champ thing. They want to sort of utilize this the best they can. And I actually like that matchup because Gaethje's a great wrestler and Chandler's a great wrestler too. So it'd be curious to see sort of how the fight plays out. Obviously, Gaethje doesn't use his wrestling that much. He's more of a stand-up guy, but Chandler's been in there with some good stand-up strikers as well. So we'll sort of see what they decide there. But I think it will be Gaethje and Chandler. And I'm with you. I think that's a great point about how they need a backup for that fight. You can't have Conor McGregor or Dustin Poirier off this card, knock on wood. You need a backup for that. So I think that's likely what it's going to end up being in terms of the next match to be added on the card. And that would be a huge boost too. I mean, both those names, regardless of what you think of Michael Chandler, he's still a guy that people are paying attention to. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Of course, the other big news that we had recently was, today actually, Yoel Romero signing with Bellator. What happened, Cole? I thought Bellator wasn't interested. See, it's kind of like when you like a girl, right? You don't show too much interest early on, and then they like you even more. So that's kind of what I think happened here. But going to fight at 205, which is interesting, which I've always said is a weight class he should compete in. Does he get the title shot right away, or do you think they give him someone else?
I don't think they do. I think they wanted that Nemkov Davis fight, which I don't get why. Because even if because they already shut down Corey Anderson for that. Corey Anderson's a much bigger name than Phil Davis. Maybe they throw Romero in there, but I saw a lot of people say Yoel Romero, Anthony Rumble Johnson in the debut. I think that'll be a sweet fight, but I wouldn't be surprised if both those guys get a Corey Anderson treatment and they get someone like a Melvin Manhoef just to get an easy win in Bellator and just start building him up that way. I don't think his debut is going to be one of these big notable names.
I don't think so either. I think they're going to do, like you said, they could have easily done Corey Anderson taking on Bader in his debut, give him the title shot right away. I think that's happened before when they brought over guys from the UFC, but I'm with you. I think just sort of the new way of matchmaking that they're doing is that we're going to bring a guy over. And plus, it never looks good on Bellator's end when someone's coming off a loss, right? I think that's been sort of one of their things. And I think that's why Anderson had to take another fight, because it's like, look, we just don't want a guy coming off a loss fighting our champion. You need to show yourself that you can actually win a fight here. So I'm kind of torn on this because part of me is like, yeah, I mean, you get the highlight reel finish that you can use over and over again when they do get that title shot. But at the same time, I'm like, that's probably one of the biggest fights you can make outside the UFC is Anthony Rumble Johnson and Yoel Romero. And then add in the other caveat, which is their management teams hate each other. I mean, dominance in first round, they hate each other. So imagine that fight just from a pure, like, kind of rivalry perspective there. I would love to see that fight. I hope it doesn't end up happening, but I'm with you. I think they end up giving Romero someone that we probably don't even know about. And same thing with Rumble. They give him just sort of, because like Manhoef was not someone I thought Anderson was going to fight, right? They'll figure out someone else and sort of slide him in there. But what's Liam McGeary doing? Are they going to bring back him? Like, that's what I think will end up happening. They're going to end up getting guys like that. I actually think McGeary got cut, but who are some names? Who comes to mind as like maybe some wild cards that they would give Romero and or Rumble?
I think like it depends what they want to do. Like maybe you give either one of those guys the old Machida, but then you have the chance of Machida makes it a boring fight and wins. It's so tough because I didn't expect Melvin Manhoef to happen at all. So I don't know if they're just going to sign him guy or bring some guy that they have. And I would like to see Yoel Romero get a top guy, like give him a core. Like I wouldn't be mad at a Corey Anderson, Yoel Romero fight, number one contender winner gets the winner at Davis, Nemkov. Do I think it's going to happen? I'm not too sure because I think the Bellator really wants to promote both those guys. And I think they'd rather have both those guys get a title shot or have that fight be for the belt. So that's why I kind of don't think there. I think it's going to be some guy that we don't really even know of right now.
Well, Cole, I'm looking on the website, and granted, I know they don't update it very much because I am seeing McGeary on here, and I'm pretty sure he got cut, but he might not be. But like some of these names here, it's like it's like a barren wasteland with some of these names, like in terms of like name value. Like, don't be surprised if like an Alessio Sakara gets to fight Yoel Romero, which would be an absolute death sentence. But like, look, don't put it past them. Manhoef shouldn't have fought Anderson. Yeah. So there we go. Our producer Jordan's telling us Liam McGeary is cut. So Bellator, you got to update your website. But yeah, in general, it's it's not good. So I don't know. I think you got to get the best fighting the best right off the bat. And I think do an Anderson Romero or do an Anderson, and I mean Anderson and Rumble have the same management, so maybe they do that maybe to make some more money, or maybe they don't put them together. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting options here in terms of light heavyweight. By the way, one quick thing on Bellator as we're sort of leaving this, and we'll get to a couple questions here. what's going on with with Canada? You can't watch the fights right now. I just saw you tweeting about that. I had to go catch the highlights. Have you heard any headway on that? Because I reached out to them and I haven't heard anything.
Oh, I've reached out. So I think Bellator doesn't like me right now. I've reached out so many times and I just keep getting ghosted. They don't answer me anymore. The first time is when they made the new move to CBS Sports. They never said anything about Canada. I emailed them, then nothing. Then the day of the event, literally an hour before the first event, they're like, "Oh, it's on DAZN now." I'm like, well, that could have been helpful like hours ago. And then this event, I was messaging them, and then I texted one person from Bellator, and he's like, "Oh, it's on CBS Sports Network in Canada." I'm like, you realize that's not a channel on Rogers Cable, which is probably
not in Rogers, but apparently Eastlink, I think like out east or something, or one of those like random cable stations does have it the same way they had access.
It's Eastlink and Cogeco, which the two most popular, especially in Toronto, are Rogers and Bell. And then he's like, I didn't know that. Let me find out for you. And that's all.
They got to address that, man. They really do, because there's a lot of Canadians who watch it. There's a lot of Canadians on their roster now. They've got Josh Hill and Jeremy Kennedy and Julia Budd, who's their former champion. So they got to fix that like ASAP and figure out what they're doing there. Because I love Bellator. They're one of the easiest promotions to work for. They're very good in terms of accessibility. But that's something they got to fix, because you're shutting out a huge portion of your audience. And look, if you don't have a solution right now, put it on YouTube. Put a geo block on there. Only Canadians can watch. Do that, and I'll be a happy camper. You know what I'm saying? So they got to figure out something that in terms of all the questions here. All right, let me get to just going to quickly hop in the video here and see if we got any questions here from our audience as we're wrapping things up here on the show. A little bit of a shorter show here today, but we'll check it out in terms of some of the questions.
James, one note, just so I don't get anyone mad at you. On his Twitter, it's his wording of Liam McGeary's standing is very odd. It says former at Bellator light heavyweight world champion. So I was looking for it, and it says former Bellator. Kind of odd phrasing to put there with the champion behind it. So he might still be on the roster, but a little bit of overstep on my end.
No worries. But I think I sort of read that too, and I feel like he was cut. Producer Jordan, thanks for that little tidbit. So we'll see what they decide to do in terms of some of the names on there. Like, I know they've cut some guys aren't even like officially cut. I think they're just free agents. Maybe they're renegotiating. Like Ricky Banderas, who it's like, I know he's on a losing streak, Cole, but like you can't get rid of that guy. He beat James Gallagher. Like you got to utilize that a little bit. So we'll see sort of what they decide to do in terms of the free agents here. If you guys, anyone watching right now, if you guys have any questions, submit them in there. But we'll start quickly here with C. Polot, is that how you say it? I don't know. My spelling's always not great here, but he says, getting ahead of myself, but if they rematch and it's close, you got to do the trilogy no matter who wins. Draw puts in an interesting situation. So that's referring to the Moreno and Deiveson Figueiredo fight. I mean, it just really depends how the fight goes. Like, I think if someone wins decisively, if there's like a finish in the rematch between Moreno and Figueiredo, then I don't think there's a need for a trilogy. But yeah, it could happen. Look, I don't think we thought we were going to have a trilogy fight between Volkanovski and Holloway, and we did, right? So, well, it seems like they're trying to put that in that direction. But yeah, we'll sort of see what happens there. Cole, what do you think? Is there a possibility for a trilogy between Moreno and Figueiredo?
I think there's, especially with the way flyweight is, I think a trilogy is bound to happen. I just don't think it's going to be 3 straight fights, because I think if Figueiredo goes out there, say knocks him, I think it really depends. If Moreno edges out a decision over Figueiredo, I think the UFC really likes Figueiredo, that they're going to try to give him his belt back. If Figueiredo beats Moreno, I don't think there's going to be a trilogy matter, unless it's another like split decision. People think Moreno won, but I think if Figueiredo even just wins a decision, I think they're going to move on.
Yeah, and I think they're still kind of building up contenders in that division. You know, I talked to Demetrius Johnson about this last week and asked him sort of, what do you think if Garbrandt, because this at the time we didn't know how great of a fight Moreno and Figueiredo was going to be. It's like, what if Garbrandt gets the next title shot? And Demetrius is like, you know what? I kind of get it, because there aren't a lot of contenders. And I was thinking about it. Like, if you look at the rankings right now, like there's a couple good fights booked, and there's Manuel Cape sort of waiting in the wings, but he doesn't have a single win in the UFC right now. So what do you do there? I think, yeah, it may, I mean, you never know, but I think they do need to do a better job of building contenders, but that's also the UFC's fault, because they haven't really got the division moving much. So we'll sort of see what they decide there in terms of some of the other matchups. So yeah, I think it's possible, to answer your question, that we could see a trilogy fight. Okay, the other question he had is, why is Hooper so hyped? I haven't seen much of him, but he doesn't look so great. It's the Fight Pass stuff. Like, they've been really, like, I think they did like a whole thing on M&Ms. Like, I remember they actually sent the media that last year, a bunch of M&Ms, like, because that's like Hooper's favorite thing. So they've been using him as like a correspondent. He's kind of like, they've been doing the whole Ben Askren thing. Like, the UFC likes him. They're promoting him very well. So I think that's played into sort of his hype, and especially why he was such a big favorite last weekend, like we talked about. But yeah, I think it's just, he's kind of a unique guy. Like, how many 21-year-olds look like him and are in the UFC? Like, I think that's played a role in it as well. Do you sort of attribute that to his popularity as well too, Cole?
Yeah, and it's his social media stuff saying like Ben Askren's his dad and that whole like thing. Like it's he knows the game. Like he's very good on social media. Like he obviously grew up with it. He knows how to promote himself. And then style wise, like he can go out there and get those weird submissions, which are just that clip alone is going to get a lot of views on Twitter. No one needs to know how the whole fight went, but the UFC can just tweet that clip and it looks like Hooper did a really awesome submission and they don't really know how the whole fight went. But it's just the way he looks, obviously how young he is. He just had a lot of hype. Even before the UFC, like coming on the Contender Series, he had a lot of hype.
Yeah, no, he did. And it's very unique to have a fighter so young competing in the Octagon like he is. We'll just wait for maybe a few more questions if we get in there. If you guys have any, we'll definitely answer them here as we're wrapping things up. But, this is the last, this Saturday, I should say, is the last UFC card of the year. And then we're wrapping things up. But I think it's been interesting, with COVID, with this pandemic, nobody anticipated this at all. Like I didn't even get to go to the States this year, which is how crazy like this pandemic's been. But how would you grade the UFC overall in terms of putting events on? They certainly limped into the end of the year with some of those fights getting canceled, but I'd give them almost like an A- in terms of what they've been able to put together with the circumstances. How do you look at the UFC in terms of the overall scope of 2020?
I think you get an A-. If they were strictly on Fight Island, it would be a lot better. Like we saw on Fight Island, there was no late COVID cancellation. The thing with Vegas is I even talked to some fighters and coaches, and what no one really noticed is on the embedded, they're showing people on the Thursday, like the fighters going out to the strip, going out shopping. So it's like, how really secure is their bubble? They kept calling it, but they got a few marks off in March when they're adamant they're putting all these cards on in March and April when everyone was off. Obviously, the whole them being the first sport back, they show that sports can come back and all that. But the last month really kind of hurt them because the day of the fight they were losing like 2 to 4 fights, like the morning of, like just like hours before because of COVID. But I think it was a strong year for them regardless.
And speaking of strong, Cole, want to thank you so much for coming on here, man. You were a great co-host. Really appreciate it. I know you got a pure fire episode of Just Scrap Radio tomorrow on BJ Penn. So if you want to mention that, also your social media handle, anything you want to plug, I'll give you the floor here.
Yeah, the show comes out tomorrow. All video interviews. It's Steven, Wonderboy Thompson, Jeff Neal, Cheeto Vera, Rob Font, Chaos Williams, Macy Barber. Then my social media is at Cole Shelton 91. So anything I do is always on Twitter.
There you go. Well, thanks for coming on, Cole. This was a lot of fun. You guys can check us movement. All my big interviews are on here. Make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We've been loving doing this show every Mondays. It's just a great way to, recap the cards and talk about some news as well. So really happy about that. Follow me on Twitter at Lynch on Sports. Same thing on Instagram. And yeah, guys, make sure you tune into this channel. Like I said, every week we're always putting on a good show. And yeah, we've got some cool interviews coming out this week. Definitely want to stay tuned for that. Don't want to reveal them yet. I'm always kind of a firm believer and don't say it right away, but hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of the week, everyone. And we will see you soon. Really appreciate the time.